Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. Donna Krstec here of Law Firm SEO. Today, I'm interviewing Lee Perlman, New Jersey bankruptcy lawyer. He's been practicing for quite a time, since '96. I met Lee in the early 2000s when he contacted me for SEO law firm marketing. So I've been working with him for quite a while. Today, Lee, you're going to see the real Lee Perlman. He talks about family, life, his successes and struggles, and how he got to where he is today. Specifically, what I found interesting is that Lee talks about the year 2020, the year of COVID, and how difficult it has been for business owners like himself, not just everyone, but Lee had some struggles as well. And he specifically does talk to recent law grads, and I think that's going to be really helpful for them to hear his tips. So I hope you enjoy this and share it with others. So here is Lee Perlman. Hello, Lee Perlman, and welcome.
Welcome. Thank you for having me, Don. I appreciate it.
Thank you. It's our pleasure. So I'd like to welcome you and tell our listeners who we're talking to today. It's Lee Perlman, New Jersey bankruptcy lawyer. You've been in practice, quite a successful practice over the years, I might add. And you started out way back after beginning in a partnership, I believe, and then went full on into sole practice, right?
Yeah, I was in a partnership for a short period of time when I first began, focusing a little bit on bankruptcy and some municipal court and criminal work. And after a period of time, eventually decided to focus and concentrate exclusively, on bankruptcy. A little bit of a leap of faith to concentrate so early on. Yeah.
So give us the why and the how of behind your going into sole practitioner.
Yeah, I mean, right now, the environment that we're in, the economic climate, COVID, and how the economy has been impacted. I got started in 1994, which was a recession time. So I'm practicing since then. And everyone begins, they don't know what area of the law they're going to enjoy, what's going to be their passion. So I really thought when I started as a 27, 28-year-old new lawyer that I was going to, want to work at a large firm and, be a partner one day and work as a tall building lawyer, as they say. And, sometimes decisions and forces that are beyond your control lead you to other areas. And fortunately, I'm glad it didn't work out that way. I like to tell people that when I started in 1994, after I became admitted to the bar, it was a very difficult climate. I was not coming from an Ivy League a law school. And I was not, an A student. I was probably a B student. I was a very hard worker, always had to work very hard for all my grades. Got through law school, with difficulty. It was, I had to spend a lot of time getting the job done. And when it came time to apply for jobs, I got a lot of rejection letters. And it was a very difficult period for me. I still have the old school typed rejection letters in a Kinko's box. In fact, a couple times I told my wife that I want to wallpaper a bathroom with them, and she won't let me. So, but I still save them and I keep them. And today, they make me smile because I realize all the difficulty and all the struggles and what I had to build to get to where I am today. Back then, obviously, I'm sure I had, I remember it was a very different, difficult, depressed mindset. It was very tough. And it was tough because economically, as I started to say, it was a very similar situation. There was recession. Obviously, weren't quite as impacted. I don't think unemployment was quite as high, but there were certainly, firms were not hiring. And despite the fact that I was not an Ivy League pedigree law school, didn't have a judicial clerkship. At the same time, it was very difficult to find a job, all kidding aside.
So it was kind of
So
like you said, okay, I got to do what I got to do in this.
I got to do
time.
it. And I used a lot of those contacts at those firms to make relationships. So I try to write back to people after rejection letters. Some of those people today, I still know,
Yeah.
you know, from some of those firms. But ultimately what I decided to do, which, you know, I don't know whether I'd recommend it today. You know, I knew what we were going to talk about today, and I really struggled with what advice I would give a young lawyer today, because I know you're going to ask me that. But I worked and did some per diem projects for some lawyers. I had a judicial internship, a clerkship with a judge. And after doing a couple of those stints and not being able to find a job and having a large stack of rejection letters, I elected to go on my own.
Wow.
Yeah, so
So that was a big step, a big leap.
it was a big step, and I didn't have a safety net. Living with mom, you know, working in the beginning as a waiter, and started my own firm. So it was a little bit of a crazy jump start to a legal career.
Yeah. Well, hey, I love that story. And I'm sure a lot of our listeners are going to, they're just going to be able to hear that and to, you know what I mean? So now when you struck out on your own, when you went sole, from partnership to sole, what did you find was your biggest obstacle, and how did you overcome it?
Yeah, I think that, you know, getting started when I did, I think I really was concerned with, you know, learning a skill set and becoming proficient in a particular area. When I first began, I worked on my own. I had a couple of clients from some referrals, and did a number of different things. I handled a divorce. I handled some criminal work. I did some bankruptcy work, probably not all that efficiently looking back all these years later.
Okay.
But what I did realize after a very short period of time, through a lot of trial and error, after about 6 months or so, that I needed to specialize.
Yeah.
I was concerned as a young lawyer about being a generalist, hanging a shingle out, and it's so difficult on your own that I figured if I could dig in and learn a particular area and become proficient and the expert, it would be a lot easier for me to represent my clients vigorously. In fact, I'll tell you an interesting story. When I began, as I said, I started on my own. I can talk a little bit more about that. And I rented space in a building, and there were a couple of lawyers in there. They were senior lawyers. They both since retired. One became a judge. I'm not sure what they really thought. They probably saw me in there as a young lawyer, probably thought I was crazy, but I paid my rent. I never missed a rent payment. And I used to go to a couple of the attorneys and ask them questions. And one of the lawyers, who was a mentor for many years, he was a generalist. So he did a lot of different, you know, practiced in a lot of different areas. And I would keep coming to him with bankruptcy questions. And after about 5 or 6 months of coming to him from time to time with questions and studying and going to seminars, he couldn't answer, or was unable to answer the questions that as they got increasingly complex. And in fact, became a little frustrated with me as a consequence. And I realized at that point that, you know, this is why you need to dig in, and you need to concentrate and learn an area. So I went to a lot of seminars. I did a lot of networking. I many times had no cases, and I literally would go to court with my suit and my briefcase, sit in the back row and listen and take notes. Probably many people thought I was there and had a case. And I remember vividly at the end of some sessions, either the prosecutor or the deputy coming up to me and saying, "Do you have a case?" I said, "Oh, no. We settled. We settled." And I would do that routinely. At the time, I wasn't married. I didn't have a girlfriend, and I would go to night court and I would sit and I would observe. And then ultimately I became friends with a prosecutor, and also with the public defender. And when they needed to go out to dinner or they had a function, I would put myself on a list and I would fill in for them. And that got me some trial experience, forced me to be up on my feet. as the municipal prosecutor or the substitute municipal prosecutor, which was really my role. I wasn't the designated prosecutor. People would line up and you had to talk to them. Same thing with the public defender. And then the judge would get up and he would say, Mr. Perlman, what do you have? And he would start, firing away, asking me questions about the cases. So you would get it from both sides. You would get it from the judge. You would get it from the litigants. But it was, you immersed yourself in those cases. And for me, that was a very good experience. And I did that for a while.
Wow, that I'm sure I love hearing that story, Lee, and I think our listeners will too. I mean, you just have to say, okay, this is what I'm focusing on, and I'm going to just go. I'm going to do it. You spent your nights in night court. I love that. And you just learned by doing, really, and by just immersing yourself in that atmosphere. Wow.
But I want to make an important point that we started to talk about before, and it relates to kind of finding what your passion is.
Okay.
Working in criminal law and criminal defense, it wasn't my passion. I don't regret the time I spent there. I enjoyed the ability to be able to get up on my feet. It forced me to be out of my comfort zone. But what it did was it showed me what an area that I really didn't have a passion for. And I was doing a little bankruptcy. I was doing a little criminal defense. I had an occasional divorce. And then I said, you know what? I really enjoy bankruptcy. I fundamentally believe to this day the same thing, that people need a financial fresh start. In fact, I've trademarked a phrase that says providing a financial fresh start for consumers since 1994. That we've trademarked that 2 years ago. Okay. And I believe that people are ultimately entitled to that. And that became my passion. And so I transitioned to learn more about bankruptcy. Many family members, friends, people thought, oh my goodness, what happens if, you can't practice bankruptcy law? You need another area to fall back on. And these were difficult decisions. I didn't know what the right answer was. Really, I made a leap of faith and said, well, I'm going to dig in and I'm going to become the expert. And I want people to be able to go to me one day. And even though you're always learning, even today, practicing 27 years, you're still learning. But I wanted to be an expert in something. I did not want to be like my mentor, where I just had a capacity right here and know a little bit about so many different areas. That was not for me. Well,
you certainly have found your niche, Lee. And it's interesting. I wanted to talk about, you talked about when you were going to seminars, and I think back in like 2006, you went to that Max Gardner boot camp, a bankruptcy boot camp, right? And then I read later, you became a teacher at these seminars and boot camps. So how important do you think that it was to take that jump from student to teacher? How big a part has that played in your success?
Yeah, I've presented now at countless seminars. I've been panelist, and still to this day, it's unsettling because you are up in front of people that you're not familiar with. And I still think to this day, in my mind, there's a difference for me presenting to lay people and consumers versus being in front of a group of lawyers. So learning that you are the expert and making sure that you understand your cases and you're well preparing for a CLE presentation in front of lawyers, I really think is almost like getting ready for court. You have to know your material, you have to know your cases, you have to expect complex questions from your colleagues. I'll tell you a funny story that I'll share. I don't think I shared it with you, but before today, I'm admitted in New Jersey, and I was invited about 2 or 3 years ago to speak before the Philadelphia Bar Association. And everyone knew that I'm not admitted in Pennsylvania. Bankruptcy is federal law. And the seminars at the Philadelphia Bar Association, they were a little different than the ones in New Jersey. The New Jersey ones are, they're at the Holiday Inn, they're at the Hilton. The Philadelphia Bar Association had their seminar at the Ritz-Carlton. So we pull up, and I was very nervous. I was going to present in front of people that I didn't know. There were Pennsylvania judges there, and I wanted to make sure that my presentation was tight. So I went up and I presented, and when it was my turn to speak, I was on a panel, and about halfway through my presentation, I just kind of reached down to grab a pen, and I felt in my pocket that I didn't have my key. And it occurred to me in the middle of the presentation that I left the car with the valet. I left the car that I had my key in my pocket, and the car was out there with the valet. And I had this vision that I completely blocked the valet intersection. And this was in the middle of my presentation. So, I continued, I did everything, and I was finished. I said, they had a break, and I ran right out, and I pictured my car clogging up all this Philadelphia traffic, and the valet was such a gentleman. He said, "Oh, no, everything was fine. We were able to," and I gave him $20. He said, "Are you okay?" I said, "Well, I was a presenter, and I came out, I was sweating back in." But, you think about these, and that was really my first time, presenting in front of, a group of peers. And, so it's nerve-wracking. But I was prepared. The presentation went well. There were no questions I couldn't answer.
Yes.
It went fine. But you definitely are outside your comfort zone.
Wow. Thanks so much for sharing these stories. I love them. I think everybody's going to like them too.
My wife says that I should write a book, but I really don't have any time now. I'm too busy with my practice.
There you go.
Yeah.
Hey, you'll find some time if it's meant to be.
Yes.
So you mentioned a little bit about the hard time that we're going through right now with this COVID situation. Okay.
Yeah.
So we're going to fast forward to 2020, COVID, rough time for everybody, especially those in business for themselves. A year we all want to kind of forget. Right. So, and I'm thinking specifically, and we had talked about this prior, law graduates this year. Okay.
Yeah.
Some of them may not have even been able to take the bar exam with the social distancing regulations and all kinds of different things. Some have, some haven't. Some have had the promise of employment, poof, disappeared, right? So what advice can you give these young men and women graduating law school, 2020, a very uncertain time? What can they learn from your experiences, Lee?
Yeah, it's so hard, and I really feel so badly for so many of the law graduates now, because this is, and it becomes cliched, but the times are unprecedented.
Yes.
And to compare, like I said in the beginning, the economic situation now with what I had, it's compounded in so many different ways. So, I would say,
you're right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, compounded in so many ways.
Mm-hmm.
I would think, to the extent that there's the ability and a possibility of distinguishing yourself in some way so that you can provide value to a future employee. Learn an area of the law that you have, passion for. Become proficient. If it's divorce law, if it's criminal law, learn some aspect where you can distinguish yourself as an expert. Learn about what new cases are out there. Start a blog, write a blog a little bit about cases that are developing, so that when you talk to the partner of the firm, you can say, you know what, I'm familiar. And you know what, don't expect yourself to become completely proficient in divorce law. Maybe it's adoption, as an example. Learn, something new that's going on in the area of adoption, so that when you come in, you can be the resident expert in that. Animal law, that's a new area of the law. Rights that people have when they take their animal to the vet, and somehow either the vet mishandles them, or there's potential veterinary malpractice. There's a body of cases out there. If you're a dog lover, learn about that. So there are emerging areas of the law where people have not really filled a void yet. So during this time, this is a perfect opportunity to become an expert in an area where there are not a lot of people who are either practicing in that area, writing about that area. Talk to other people in other parts of the country. If you're admitted in New Jersey and you want to understand a little bit about the animal rights law, Google people in Vermont and talk to them, because there's no risk of competition when you're speaking to somebody in Vermont. They're not going to be threatened. I'll tell you, I go to seminars all the time. And one of the things that I really enjoy in our old COVID world, when you can shake somebody's hand and sit down at a seminar, I love to talk to my contemporary in Massachusetts, in Illinois, in California. I go up to people and I talk to them, and I can be very candid with them about, their practice, what they do, how they handle their SEO, What do they do with consultations? And the reason I can do that is because they're not my competition. I can never have a conversation. I love my colleagues in New Jersey. We're all very friendly, but I would never have a candid conversation with them about the ins and outs and the nuts and bolts of their practice. But I have a buddy in Massachusetts and I have a friend in Wisconsin. We trade emails all the time about very specific things. So that's an opportunity to be very candid. But likewise, getting back to what we were talking about before, it's a chance to find a specific niche.
Yes. Yeah, wow. That is such great advice. Okay. I love that. You could share and learn from others who are not your competition. Get out there and blog, do something, anything, right? I mean, I blog about that myself to people who are new in the law, you know? So, wow, I love your stories. I love your advice, Lee. Thank you so much. I would like to end this instead of asking how you, as a success, how do you start your day, Lee? I watch a lot of podcasts and that's what they keep asking at the end. I want to ask you, how do you end your day? How do you wind down from being Lee Perlman, bankruptcy attorney?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. So I have two kids. They're 12 and they're 9. So I go from a very busy paced office. I have a team of 10 people, 2 lawyers, 8 support staff, and things, thank goodness, we're busy. There's a lot going on during the day. So I have to work really hard when I end my day to be able to take it down a couple notches and not walk into the door on DEFCON 5. It just doesn't work. My wife doesn't appreciate it. I've learned. I'm going to be married 20 years soon. I have 2 kids. They're at a different point, where the homework is going on. And, my wife is a stay-at-home mom, head of the PTO at school and real involved with the kids. And she doesn't want to hear me come in and talk about law stories from the beginning of opening the door. So my larger point is I have to learn to take a deep breath. I have a meditation app that I try and use. I'm different. I try and use it at the end of the day. Some people use it at the beginning of the day so that you can take it down a couple notches. It's a great question because your family, they're at least in my example, they're at a different point where you are. So I have to be prepared, when I step in the door to be able to, be, a dad and a husband.
Wow. I like that. That's a good way to wind down the day because I find that everybody nowadays wants to be hyped up and going for it, going 24/7. I mean, we gotta wind down at some point. So thank you for that. And thanks for everything. I'd like to thank our listeners, and I hope they got as much out of this as I did. It was a lot of pointers, a lot of gold nuggets in there, Lee. So listeners,
thank you, Donna.
if you like this conversation and this podcast and video, please like, share, subscribe to my channel. Leave a comment because I love hearing from you all after you see these. And thank you for joining us. And thank you again, Lee, for everything. It was great.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.